Hey everybody, I'm Tiffany Weber and I'm a real estate attorney in North Carolina, and today I'm going to talk to you about the most common questions that I get asked in closings. Now, I'm not the only attorney in my office that does closings, so I crowdsourced this a bit and asked the two other attorneys that are in my office every day, what do you get asked most commonly? And not surprisingly, we pretty much came up all with the same list. So the first one that I get is, when is my first payment? Now, a lot of the questions that I get asked in closings are probably a better fit for your lender, but I have the information in front of me and so will you. So there are questions that I'm able to answer quite easily just referring to the loan documents. So your first payment is going to be set forth in your promissory note and then also in a document called the first payment letter. Now, if you are buying a residential property and you're getting a conventional residential loan, then your first payment is usually not going to be the very next month. It's going to be the first complete month after that. So for example, today I'm recording this on March 14th, 2022. So my first payment would not be April 1st, it would be May 1st. The next question I get asked a lot is, one, it's a compound question. What is an escrow account and do I have to have it? An escrow account, I've talked before about on the channel briefly, an escrow account is kind of a forced savings account for things that you're going to have to pay in the future. So commonly that's homeowners insurance, those are your taxes, and then if you have PMI, that's also going to be included in your escrow account. And if you have to have it, it depends on a few things. I don't personally think I've ever seen a loan with PMI that didn't have an escrow account required. Now, I have seen escrow accounts waived, but those people met certain requirements of the lender. You'd have to ask your lender whether it's an income requirement, an equity requirement. It just depends. So there may be circumstances where you can have your escrow account waived, but that doesn't mean that you don't still have to pay your taxes and insurance. It just means that you're not forced to save for it. The next question I get asked most often as a joke, but sometimes seriously, is, do I have to sign all of this? And the short answer is yes. You have to sign anything required by your lender to get the loan. And you also have to sign any documents required under the contract to consummate the purchase. Very rarely, I'd say maybe one time in the last 6 years, have I seen a lender make any alterations to their standard documents. And the one time that I saw that, it's because they actually sent the wrong document over and it was referring to a different state and we had to get that corrected. Another question I get asked quite often is a single person buying property saying, if I get married, or a person that's engaged to be married, if I get married or once I get married, what do I have to do with the property? And the short answer is, provided you don't have any sort of prenup or postnup or any agreement talking about the division of property such that you don't want to have shared ownership of the property, then I recommend, if you buy property as a single person, then you get married and you want your spouse to be owner of the property with you, then you redeed the property to yourselves as tenants by the entirety. Now, I've gone into these types of ownership in detail in other videos, so if you want to know more about tenants by the entirety and its value to you as a married couple, go check that out. But briefly, it's just a way that only married couples can own property that gives you some protection from creditors and gives you some avoidance of probate, because if one of you were to pass away, the other is going to own the property completely and entirely immediately without having to go through probate. The next question is really more of a lender question, but I can kind of give you the overview of what I know, is how do I get rid of PMI? So if you have PMI, then your lender is going to have a document in your loan package that tells you what you need to do to get rid of it. So most often that's paying down the loan to value of what the property is valued at the time that you purchased it to 80% of the loan. So you're just going to want to make sure, for example, if you buy a property for $100,000, then you need to owe $80,000 or less on the property in order to get rid of PMI. Some lenders give you the option of being able to get the property reappraised after a certain period of time, provided that you've made substantial improvements to the property and can demonstrate an increased value. So that requires, again, an appraiser to come out and make sure that the property is actually worth more than when you bought it. But those documents in your loan package are going to explain how you can get rid of PMI and on what time frame. Then finally, I get asked a lot, what happens after this, meaning the closing appointment. So after you've signed everything, what happens now? Well, that means that the deed has to get recorded. And once the deed's recorded, then the new buyers, they can get the keys to the property, and then the sellers can get paid. So I'm going to go into depth into what has to happen before the deed records or before you can get the keys in a separate video. But there are a lot of things that have to happen from the time that you leave the closing attorney's office in North Carolina to once the deed has been recorded so that you can get the keys and the money. So it's not instantaneous. You should not expect as a seller to be handed a pile of cash right at the table. I can't think of a single way that you could lawfully do that. So if you're a seller, please do not have it in your head that once you get to the closing office, there's just gonna be a suitcase of cash slid over to you. That's just not how it works. And then buyers, the sellers don't have to give you the keys until the deed has recorded, and the deed doesn't record while you're sitting at the table. So there's going to be a little bit of time. So it's probably not a good idea to, if your closing is at 9 a.m., have your movers scheduled for 9:15. You're going to need a little bit of time after that to be able to get the deed recorded and get access to the property. Now, those are the most common questions. Obviously, every closing is a little different, and people ask all kinds of questions. They might see a document and suddenly have like a list of 10 questions that they ask, but I don't get asked those all the time. So these are the ones that I get asked most commonly, and there are probably some that if you're about to buy a property, you've got on your mind too. So hopefully that was helpful, and we'll see you in the next video.